My name is Clara. I want to start by saying the obvious. People who think betrayal is a single moment are wrong. Betrayal is a slow accumulation of small permissions you give someone because you love them. It begins with a sentence you excuse, a lie of omission you forgive, a boundary you call flexible. I married Ethan 9 years ago because he was quiet in the ways I needed and loud in the ways I wanted. Someone who could be both a harbor and a spark. Last summer, he told me about a woman from his gym. He said it casually, the sort of line men drop in safe conversation. There's someone at the gym who seems interesting. He framed it as benign curiosity, a husband trying to make small talk. I laughed it off. I should have felt the first itch then. I should have named it. Instead, I made a joke and told him not to invite strange women to gym dates at our house. He smiled, promised he would not, and we moved on like an ordinary couple with ordinary trust. That is how it always starts, so normal that you don't notice the fault line opening beneath you. For months, nothing happened that I could pin down. He worked remotely. I commuted to an office 3 days a week. We had 2 kids, dinner rhythms, and a mortgage. That rhythm is deceptive because it hides small betrayals in plain sight. Then one night at dinner he mentioned, again, an upcoming lunch with the couple from the gym. He said it like he was asking permission. I remember putting down my fork and looking at him. My voice was steady when I said, "No. I don't like that." He rolled his eyes like I had used a dramatic word, then promised not to go. Still, in my gut, something twisted. He told me about twin flames and catalysts for growth. He insisted this was platonic, that twin flame didn't mean soulmate and that it was harmless. He said it would be good for us all. He offered me the dictionary definition of a phrase he'd found online, as if definitions could fix a secret. I asked him simple questions. Does she have your number? Do you text? He waved them away. No, he said, just social media. I wanted to believe him then because to not believe him was to catch fire. I wanted to sit in warmth, not accuse, so I let it be. You learn the face of gaslighting when tiny denials begin to stack. At first it was texts that weren't important. Then gifts, odd, small things like a first aid kit, a travel toiletry bag, for his long shifts, he said. She showed up to sessions wearing a look that fit his taste, sculpted, deliberate, the kind of curated femininity that looks like a magazine spread in motion. He told me they were just workout partners. She's training for bodybuilding competitions, he said. I'm helping with nutrition. He made it sound like penance, a favor for someone in need. But there were 4 a.m., good morning, messages that meant nothing, but also meant everything. She started bringing card games to the gym, Huga conversation, he called it, and I would see the photos she posted. 2 cups of coffee, 2 water bottles, the tenderness of proximity without a public label. I argued with myself and then with him until my throat was raw. He promised boundaries and then crossed them with the kind of careful steps that feel thoughtful until you see the pattern. It is exhausting to catalog the ways a friendship becomes a rivalry. Everything changed the night I found the email. I wasn't snooping to punish, I was searching for evidence for my own sanity. What I found was worse, a draft he'd written to himself the day before a lunch he had failed to mention. It began like notes to a lover, not a planner. Questions about her dreams, lists of her childhood details, her clothing sizes scribbled with a tenderness that made bile rise. He had written, "Do you think she dreams about me? Would the dreams be good? Ask about her siblings. Save that screenshot." He had apologized to himself for screenshotting a vanishing message. He had catalogued his longing in a way that made it impossible to claim innocence. When I confronted him, the confession came like a wave against the wrong shore. He cried, told me he recognized the relationship had become problematic, and that he intended to end it, until she ended it first when her husband confronted her. She had apparently been told to pause, she did. I felt a relief so briefly that it tasted like deception. We were in a house with small people sleeping down the hall. I decided to forgive because they said it was over. That was my first mistake, believing the public ending matched the private truth. Forgiveness was not free. It cost me a new definition of trust and the daily humiliation of watching him make choices that showed where his heart might rest on any given day. He blocked her social media and promised no contact. I watched him change gym locations, at his suggestion, and I took those moves as proof we could rebuild. We tried couples counseling once, a week after Thanksgiving, when we were supposed to be earnest and raw and rebuilding. "We'll work through this," he said. "We'll go every week." Instead, appointments were cancelled with plausible exhaustion. The baby was restless. Work deadlines loomed. He began sleeping in a different room because our youngest sleep required it. He used that as an excuse to avoid the emotional labor his choices had created. The small silences compounded into a canyon. I looked for signs that my alarm was wrong. I searched browser histories, deleted search queries, just little things like synonyms for beautiful and good morning, which he cleared quickly. He left me love notes in the car. I wanted them to be proof of affection and not a crossword puzzle. I wanted faith. Instead, I found a map. Between Christmas and New Year's, he admitted he'd run into them at the old gym location. He said he'd told them the friendship had to stop. He sounded apologetic. Weeks later, he told me she had shown up again at the other location, and he insisted they had not spoken. He leaned on semantics like a drowning man clings to straws. We didn't talk in the gym, we only acknowledged each other. But language is a fragile raft. After months of small denials, I began to suspect larger ones. I am not proud of what I did next. One night in late January, exhausted and lonely, I picked up his phone to put it on the charger and saw a video playing. Underneath, a conversation with her scrolled, "I smell you," and a heart emoji. Immediately the screen blanked as if the content had been made to vanish by design. I recorded it on my phone before it disappeared, then sent that video to her husband on Instagram with a message that said, bluntly, "They can't stop." I felt every instinct screaming to protect my children, my life, and myself. When I texted Ethan that evening, "You are done," he begged me to wait until the kids were out of the house. That request told me everything I needed to know about who he valued. The next day I demanded answers. He offered explanations that felt small next to the evidence. He said she had reached out to him on MyFitnessPal after she'd been blocked on Instagram, a conniving route designed to leave fewer traces. She had claimed depression. He told her to seek her husband's support. She'd persisted, and he had been soft in the face of someone described as fragile. He called it compassion. I called it a breach. He told me he had tried to end things and that she had beat him to it. But his actions, lunches, Starbucks meetings, hug-filled parking lot encounters, continued. He'd lied about having her number when he said he did not. He'd hidden conversations by unblocking, talking, then blocking again so any glance at his phone would show nothing. To anyone who judges me for snooping, I say this: building your sanity requires the truth. If the truth is kept under layer after layer of technical blocking and plausible deniability, someone has given themselves permission to live in that gray area. And when secrets become systematic, the gray area is the architecture of deceit. At the same time, there were smaller shockwaves. I lost financial stability without warning. Ethan had quietly stopped paying a credit card that had been under my name and sent my score from near perfect down to troubling. I could not move out immediately, the children needed routine, and the mortgage was in his name. I learned that survival while betrayed requires invention. I retained a divorce attorney as a measure of pressure and protection, not out of desire but out of necessity. I told him there would be consequences. Either he would choose our marriage and show it, or we would begin the legal process. He argued I was dramatic, controlling, and hysterical. He accused me of not understanding male friendships. In that language he hid his own failings. I learned to hear what men said when they were trying to justify softness for other women. It is always worded as emotional labor or relief. But that relief is not offered to you. It is taken from you. For a while, friends told me to forgive and move on. He's socially awkward, they said. He doesn't have many friends. That argument is a coat people throw on men to protect them from accountability. The problem is not awkwardness, the problem is choice. Yes, he is an introvert. Yes, he is clumsy at small talk. But he also understood the edges of this friendship and still went toward them. There is a difference between being socially inept and being irresponsible with another human heart. I made a choice then to stop begging people to explain away the obvious. I collected facts instead. I kept emails, timestamps, and screenshots. I saved voice memos so my own voice would remember what happened. The act of documenting felt like forging armor. People do not like to see a woman building herself. There is an old discomfort with a person who refuses to be passive when hurt. I welcomed that discomfort. It kept me honest. He promised repeatedly to end it. He blocked her. For a short while, the house calmed. That calm was deceptive, like the lull before real weather. I attended to the children, to small domestic duties, to the life that needed tending. But then, in January, he admitted he had run into them at the old gym twice. He claimed clarity. Then in February, he refused counseling, citing exhaustion and a toddler's sleep. It was not that he could not find time, it was that he chose where to expend refuges. I began to map his choices against our shared rhetoric, his promises, his apologies, and the small notes he left that had once felt romantic but now felt like paprika on a wound. He asked for space while he figured out boundaries. Boundaries are not found by rehearsal in secret. They are public obligations you honor daily. When someone rejects the public labor, they are choosing secrecy over transparency. I gave him a chance to prove me wrong. I asked him to start therapy. I asked him to go to marriage counseling. He agreed at first and then tapered away from the meetings one by one. He would text later that he was too tired, or he would say, honestly, that the youngest was not sleeping and he was the only one who could soothe her. Those words sometimes were true, sometimes they were convenient. The pattern matters. When you are consistent about avoiding accountability, it tells a story. After weeks of being the one to drive humility, I realized I was holding both sides of the ledger for him and for our family. That is an impossible burden to carry if you expect a marriage to be mutual. So I stopped doing it purely for the illusion of unity. I started doing it as a measure of self-preservation. The change was subtle at first, different replies, less frantic attempts to anticipate his mood. It felt like testing a rope to see if it held. Then came the day I found the explicit messages. I had the kids down, the house was quiet. His phone lay on the table, unlocked for a second before it went dark. On the screen, I saw text lines describing sexual preferences and flippant fantasies that had nothing to do with friendship. He had been sexting her in a way that was intimate even by our long marriage's standards. I recorded it. I could have raged, could have broken things. Instead, I sat and made a decision. The choice to record that moment rather than destroy it was not about trapping him. It was about making the damage visible to anyone who needed to see it. His employer, her husband, and me. Evidence is not vengeance, it is ownership of the truth. I texted the conversation to her husband without comment. I told Ethan that he had ruined his chances. He begged me not to file for anything while the children were young. He asked for time. He asked me to be patient. The plea exposed his priorities. Keep the family picture tidy and your mistakes private, even if privacy requires deception. Her husband's reaction was swift and merciless in its ordinariness. He confronted her, she defended herself in the most human ways, crying, rationalizing, promising to stop. And she stopped, but only under pressure. It was not my cruelty that removed her, it was the reality of consequence when someone besides the betrayed begins to call time. People talk about revenge as dramatic exposure. The cold thing is to let truth unfold naturally through the systems people already rely on, reputational and professional pressures, partners who decide they will no longer tolerate chaos. Her husband's intervention ended the private availability she had used to gather sympathy. Did I feel guilty? A little, but not for the consequence. I felt guilty for the way it had to come to that. The shortest path to correction was not pleasant, but it was necessary. After the exposure, Ethan's defensiveness turned inward. He wanted to argue the nature of friendship and whether words count in the same way actions do. He wanted me to step back and see the emotional reality he had lived in. He claimed the woman had been an escape, someone who made him feel seen. But one cannot separate feeling from responsibility. Feeling like you were seen does not justify making another person invisible. The moral danger in his defense was that it reduced consent into victimhood. I was lonely, so I am forgiven. That logic offers men a license to practice discretion instead of integrity. I told him as much. I said the truth. I do not owe him absolution because he is human and flawed. I told him the house cannot be repaired only by apology, it must be repaired by changed behavior. So I devised a plan that was not theatrical but precise. I would not humiliate them on social media or compose an explosive scene at a party. That's not the kind of cruelty I wanted to embody. Instead, I took control of the things he used to take for granted. I reorganized finances, quietly at first. I consulted with the attorney I'd kept on retainer and asked about equitable separation and custody. I made lists and budgets and possibilities, not as threats, but as options I could enact should he not choose the life we'd promised our children. Then I acted publicly in the spaces that mattered: parent groups, school functions, and mutual friend circles where his reputation mattered. I told our story only as necessary, truth delivered without venom, but with clarity. People responded by asking questions. People chose to be present in new ways. The social web restructured itself, and that restructuring was enough pressure to reveal where loyalty truly lay. One afternoon, when he sat down with me to say he wanted us to try, really try, again, I told him about the small changes I had already enacted. I told him I had filed some paperwork that allowed for separation as an option while keeping our children's stability. I had not yet filed, and the option was a lever. I explained gently that I was not asking for a threat. I was asserting boundaries and providing space to prove intention. His face went pale the way it does when a man whose armor has been removed remembers he cannot just perform kindness to fix everything. He accused me of manipulation. I smiled because I'd learned long ago that accusation is a common defense when a person's privileges are questioned. I told him the truth. For months I had been using forgiveness like a bandage over an open wound. I wanted to live without needing to check his phone, and he had to show me one fact at a time that I could. To his credit, some small things changed. He stopped going to the gyms with multiple locations. He deleted the apps he had used as channels to reach her. He blocked her. He told his friends what had happened in an attempt to own up. But he also left counseling when it became uncomfortable. He promised, but did not always show. I listened to the promises and watched the patterns. Patterns are the language of truth. A man can scream that he has changed in one conversation, but his appointments, his small sacrifices, and his willingness to accept public inconvenience, those are the evidence. He began to show up differently with our children. He started to help more with practical tasks, which was good. Yet the old habits remained in shadow: an extrasexual curiosity, a willingness to flirt with risk. The measure was not whether he spoke sweetly, but whether he would do the boring, steady work of rebuilding trust. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life on a different axis. I restarted small projects I had shelved when life had gotten busy: the volunteer program at the elementary school, a freelance editorial contract, an evening course on writing I always wanted to take. These things were not punitive, they were restorative. They were my way of coloring the interior of a life so that it no longer revolved around a man's choices. I kept close friends who knew how to ask me tough questions without pity. I cut off acquaintances who made excuses for Ethan's behavior. Each small redirection made the notion of leaving less catastrophic and more a plan for wholeness. They were my way of coloring the interior of a life so that it no longer revolved around a man's choices. I kept close friends who knew how to ask me tough questions without pity. I cut off acquaintances who made excuses for Ethan's behavior. Each small redirection made the notion of leaving less catastrophic and more a plan for wholeness. The moral revenge I wanted was not to heal them spectacularly. I wanted to ensure they could not return to normalcy as if nothing had happened. That meant creating barriers to complacency. I reached out to mutual connections and, again, quietly, shared the facts of what had happened. Not to shame anyone publicly, but to create a record outside our private sphere. People responded by distancing themselves in ways that mattered. They stopped offering favors that had been part of Ethan's professional scaffolding. They declined his invitations. They treated him with a cool politeness that is more damaging than gossip. Social ostracism is not glamorous, but it is effective. It forces someone to face the consequences of choices in the space where their status matters. It is the cold justice of a quiet community refusing to allow old habits to return without reckoning. He called me angry, accusing me of orchestrating ruin. I said, yes, I was organizing the conditions that would protect my children and my dignity. He told me I had gone too far. I replied that what felt like excess to him felt like necessary architecture to me. We argued about who was permitted to feel wronged longer, and I realized he still thought forgiveness was a one-time ticket. I told him forgiveness requires labor and that labor must be visible. That night, I slept in the spare room and did not allow self-pity to be a currency. There is a kind of coldness in choosing to leave that is empowering because it is deliberate. There is power in deciding you will not be someone's secret safety net again. In spring, when the community had changed its posture, Ethan attempted a reclamation of image, slow apologies, visible attendance at school activities, a post about growth. Some accepted it, some did not. I observed without joy. I began to date the idea of independence, rental listings, savings plans, the logistics of moving the children without uprooting them. I did this quietly, because the moment you make desperation visible you lose leverage. People accuse a betrayed spouse of grandstanding when they begin to plan. That accusation is a way to shame someone back into silence. I refused to be shamed. I scheduled meetings with financial consultants and trained myself to speak in numbers. It is soothing, in a practical sense, to know what you will do if the worst comes. It's also a relief to know you can choose. At one parents' meeting, a woman I had always thought polite asked me in a soft voice, "Is he different now?" I told her the truth without drama. He is trying. He is inconsistent. He has abandoned some habits and still keeps others. She nodded and later told me she had seen him, sober-looking, and trying to help with a bake sale. That kind of small public validation matters, because a child's world is made of small moments: who shows up for soccer practice, who attends the recital, who reads at bedtime. My revenge had nothing to do with public shaming. It had everything to do with creating a future for my children where the adults around them were accountable. I wanted them to grow up in a home where apologies were followed by changed patterns, not catchy Instagram captions. In late summer I began to move pieces decisively. He could have prevented it, he did not stop it for long enough. I issued a formal ultimatum in writing: therapy ongoing, consistent attendance, joint financial transparency, and external accountability with documented sessions. It read like a contract because it was one. I told him if he would not commit, then I would file for separation at the end of our grace period. He chose to sign the document in front of a counselor and initially committed. For a time, I believed this was my moment, that the moral architecture we had created would hold. But the road to truth is slippery. The promises did not always catch. When someone chooses the path of half-effort, you cannot rebuild a home with half a hammer. By autumn, I recognized the truth. He was not invested enough to carry the weight of his choices, and sometimes the world's pressures will not follow a person who prefers to perform responsibility rather than earn it. I started to assemble the final acts: legal consultation, a plan to secure an environmental, transfer plans for our children's schooling so their dreams would be preserved. I told him I was preparing to move the kids at the end of the separation. I did not shout. I explained logistics. My coldness surprised him. I was not cold because I didn't fear it. I was cold because I had learned to preserve my life. I had learned that staying for the kids did not mean staying for when I could choose someone else. There is a certain justice in leaving a person with their choices intact and refusing to be the one to mop up the chaos. When I finally left, it was not a dramatic act. I packed the kids' clothes, arranged movers, and told Ethan the date. He reacted with the sudden panic of someone who suddenly values what they thought he could always rely on. He offered to sell his car, to change jobs, to do anything. He asked me to stay. I reminded him I had spent months asking for visible labor, not one-off grand gestures. It is not that I wanted loyalty, I wanted accountability. I wanted him to understand that he had been offered numerous chances to build trust and he had not. The moral link he inflicted could have been mended with a consistent commitment. Instead, it had been bandaged and broken too many times. In the months after the move, things changed in the small, necessary ways that proved life could continue. I paid bills on schedule. I volunteered at the school and slept through the night on my own terms. I planted a small garden for the kids. There were moments of grief, holidays when his absence was wrong, but those were manageable because the plan was real. He texted apologetically, with rare moments of self-awareness. We arranged custody, and in that process he finally accepted some responsibility. He attended therapy sporadically, though I cannot say whether it was for me or to make re-entry possible. The moral victory was not his suffering, it was my ability to choose a life that did not make me smaller. Sometimes I think about the nature of cold justice. People imagine revenge as public spectacle, a parade of vindication. But the kind I wanted was quieter and more difficult to stomach. It required me to plan for a life my fear told me would be impossible. It required lawyers' fees and late-night spreadsheets, the courage to tell friends the truth without the want of pity. It required me to be the person who would sleep in unfamiliar beds and still get up for school drop-off. Justice, in this sense, was not humiliation, it was refusal to be a footnote in someone else's romance. It was a recalibration of where dignity lives. If you read this and you are wondering whether to forgive or to leave, know this: forgiveness is not a free currency. It is earned. If someone wants to rebuild, they must take on the daily ink and paperwork of accountability where promises become recorded acts. I wanted a partner who would choose my story regularly, publicly, and without doubling back. When he could not, my cold choice was to take control of what remained mine, my time, my children, and my dignity. I left with them. I did not seek spectacle. I sought stability. That choice felt like revenge only to those who confuse cruelty with proof. To me, it felt like coming home to myself. If he rebuilds a life worthy of my trust someday, then perhaps we will both be the better for the lessons we learned. And